Hello everyone, Ushanka Show is back in the house, and we're gonna talk again about life in the Soviet Union. Здравствуйте, дорогие товарищи! Вы слушаете программу Ushanka Show. In today's video, we're gonna talk about shopping for shoes in the Soviet Union. This topic was requested by several viewers after my recent video about shopping for the clothes. And just a friendly reminder, if you're interested in the topic of the shopping in the Soviet Union, I have a separate playlist. I will provide the link below in the comments section, but it mostly covers shopping for groceries. Okay, boys and girls, let's start with the lesson of Russian language. Урок русского языка. Обувь. Обувь. That's the Russian word for shoes. Обувь. And the Ukrainian word for shoes is взуття. Взуття. Similar to clothing, we didn't have any shoe brands in the Soviet Union. I actually recall only one shoe factory that wasn't named after Lenin or October Revolution. It was a shoe factory in Leningrad and it was called Skorokhod, Speedwalker. I don't remember that they were any better quality than anybody else, but I just recalled that I guess you can call it brand, Skorokhod. Once again, similar to clothing, you could purchase shoes in standalone stores where it's just called обувь. And that's when you expect to find some shoes and maybe socks. Also, every Soviet department store, Univermag, had a shoe department. We could also purchase shoes. Then we also had a really unusual and I would say interesting distribution system of shoes. And I cannot tell you all the details because, of course, I was just a teenager. But quite often there'll be shoes arriving to factory, or like in my case, my mom worked at научно-исследовательский институт, so it's like a research institute. So there'll be maybe 20 or 50 pair of shoes arriving straight from the shoe warehouse to the place where people work. And those were usually those дефицитные обувь, so deficit, the items that are hard to find in a regular store. So usually there'll be maybe like a female winter boots that came from Finland, were imported officially from Finland. As I said, I don't know details, but picture you have a factory that 2,000 people work and you got 100 pair of shoes arrived. I mean, different sizes, same shoes. So what people did, they did lotteries. I participated in one of those once, and actually I won. That's why I remember. So every department will, they say, okay, each department will get 4 pairs because, they just divide by amount of people. So people will cut pieces of paper. For example, if there's 20 people working in that department, you have 20 pieces of paper. 4 of those pieces of paper will have words, a pair of shoes. And then, of course, you put in a hat or in a box, and everyone will stick their hand in that box and fish out a piece of paper. And if your piece of paper says a pair of shoes, you won. But of course, you still have to buy them. And hopefully they'll be the size that you need. And I remember that because one time I won, and it's hilarious part because those were actually winter boots for women, but I won it. So my plan was or resell it and maybe make some money, or my mom could use it if it's her size. But I never seen that pair. And when I was started asking questions like, hey, they're supposed to bring a pair of shoes for me, I won. No one could tell me anything. And later I found out just by accident that the general director's secretary, a young lady, she really liked that pair of boots. So they canceled my winning and she purchased them. So even if you won that lottery, you still have to buy it. But as I said, the situation with shoes were so bad with the good quality shoes that people were even playing these lotteries to win a pair of boots or whatever. And of course, we had black market, and I have a couple of people asking me a question. It's not like you're picturing there's this secret place when people gather and they, buy, resell goods. Back in those days, that pretty much you need to know people who deal with shoes. So they were like, hey, there's the phone number, call the guy, maybe he has some shoes. So that's people, they knew people. So for example, who traveled abroad on a regular basis, they'll bring items from, West Germany, England, whatever. They buy specific shoes that they know they can resell and make more money, because that's how you could really earn good income by purchasing goods in Europe using that minuscule allowance they give you. and then you can get crazy money for a pair of Adidas shoes or something like that. So we had black market as well. And of course, we need to mention fartsovщики. That's the young people usually that were hunting foreign tourists in the big cities. You know, they were hanging out around them in tourist hotels where the foreign tourists stayed, and they will ask to sell them whatever you have, you brought with you, shoes, jeans. Usually they were going after jeans because those were like the highest margin, highest demand. So also that will be the way, if you know any fartsovщики, they'll probably have something to sell to you. And it's interesting, the word is fartsa. That's the items that people bought, foreign goods. And it came because the kids were asking for sale, but they sounded like forsa, fartsa. So that's the word appeared in the Russian language, fartsa, originated from English for sale. And the people who were doing that were fartsovщики. For years, I couldn't figure out because that's such a weird word. And talk about quality. There's an example. So this is Soviet era children's sandals, sandaliki as we call them, made of leather. And as you see, it's really primitive. It's not, I'm not sure how the shoe were looking in 80s or 70s in the West, but they have raw edges, not really like precisely made, but this is what pretty much you would get Soviet-made shoes. And on this photo, you see the bottom of those shoes, and what's interesting, it actually has price on it. So since prices didn't change often or at all in the Soviet Union, manufacturers will be putting price right on the item. So in this case, this pair of small children's sandals are 8 rubles, 50 kopecks. You could purchase around 42 loaves of bread for that amount of money. And if you consider $2 a loaf for the American money right now, you're looking about $85 to pay for the pair of shoes like this if you compare, shoes to bread. And another interesting detail about this picture, heels were replaced. So shoes were quite expensive for Soviet people, mostly because we had such a small salaries. So, and the top is leather, so it will hold on pretty good, but you'll take it to the shoe repair shop to fix the outsoles. So you could tell those were like brand new. And that was a huge business, repairing shoes in the Soviet Union. And I believe shoe repair was also a pretty big business in the United States of America, and only cheap Chinese imports really like killed this business, and there's hardly anyone who repairs shoes anymore. There's a tiny niche left. It's, ladies who buy expensive high heels like Jimmy Choo's or, whatever the other Blatnik brands, I don't know about them. But those ladies, if they pay $300-500 for a pair of shoes, they definitely want to fix those parts, especially on a high heel. Because I remember that's what my mom, she had a nice pair of high heel shoes, and she constantly had to fix that rubber thing on a high heel because that's what wearing out first. And here's another photo of children's shoes. As I said, any pair you look at, really primitive, really basic. And I just discovered there's the people who collect now those shoes. For some reason, they became hot collector's items, I guess, for those who miss Soviet Union. I think the most popular and universal type of shoes in the Soviet Union were keds. Those could be used pretty much doing anything. I wore them in school during a gym class. Of course, if you do sports play, soccer, that's the shoes you wear. People wore kedi going camping, hiking, working in the fields. So pretty much a lot of pictures from the Soviet Union, especially of young people, you see them wearing kedi. And what's interesting is probably more, I would say, for the city people, because in the villages it's a different story, but keds were extremely popular. Soviet people learned about keds just like they learned about jeans back in 1957 during the 6th World Festival of Youth and Students in Moscow. That's when a lot of foreigners arrived to the Soviet Union and people saw them wearing keds and wearing jeans. The Soviet government and central planning responded pretty quick in this case, and in the 60s, pretty much every young person would own a pair of keds. They were in deficit. You could purchase them in any shoe store or any sports stores. And there's a lot of photos of all kind of people wearing Keds in the Soviet Union. Also, some Keds were imported, of course, not from the United States, which I think original brand Keds came from the US, but we imported Chinese Keds as well as made in Finland, and that brand was called Nokia. The most popular Chinese brand was called Dva Mяча, two balls, which I found kind of hilarious. But anyway, I don't remember those myself. I always had Soviet-made Keds, but I went quite a few pairs of those. But of course, the most desirable brand in the Soviet Union was Adidas. Adidas, that's how we say it. Not Adidas, Adidas. And I already made a video about Adidas in the Soviet Union, so I'll post the link in the comment sections below. I just want to repeat one story. So on this picture, you see these unusual looking Adidas shoes. Those are made for country skiing. So that's the ski shoes made specifically for country skiing. That funny looking nose, that's you attach to your ski and you ski. Interestingly enough, Soviet government, this is your central planning, decided it was very important to open production of Adidas ski shoes in the Soviet Union. So people were dying to wear normal casual Adidas shoes, but Soviet government decided it's important to have ski shoes Adidas. So guess what some desperate people did? They purchased ski shoes, they carefully trimmed off that silly nose part, and they wore these shoes like street shoes. Now, if you ever use that type of shoe, or you know anything about country skiing, the whole outsole is like a solid, unflexible piece of plastic. So literally, walking those shoes are extremely uncomfortable because they have no flex whatsoever, but people still went through that pain so they can look cool wearing Adidas shoes. Like on this picture taken in Moldova, at that time we called it Moldavia, sometimes around 1983 or 84. And this guy, I believe, wears that type of ski Adidas shoes. And I know it's Moldavia because on the top left corner there is a plakat slogan talking about 60 years since creating of Moldovan Soviet Socialist Republic and Communist Party. And actually Moldovan Socialist Republic was created twice. First time in 1924, plus 60 makes 1984. And that time it was autonomous republic as a part of Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. In 1940, when Stalin occupied Bessarabia region, then they created Moldovan Soviet Socialist Republic, but that would mean that this picture was taken in 2000, 1940 plus 60, so that doesn't make sense. In 2000, no one cared about celebrating the Communist Party of Moldova, so this photo relates to 1924 creation of autonomous Moldovan Republic, so the photo is somewhere around 1983-84. And this photo, it's so cool. I could make a long and boring video about an hour just analyzing every detail in this picture, but generally people are standing next to Parikmacherskaya, so it's a barber shop. So there's probably other stores nearby because there's a guy in the background near his Zaporozhets ZAZ rear engine air-cooled car loading some stuff on the top. So there's probably some kind of market nearby as well as stores, and that's why there's so many people hanging out. And our hero definitely looks happy. There is not often you see photos from the Soviet Union of people smiling so broadly. So he wearing cool Adidas shoes, which we're gonna look at a little bit closer in a second. But he also has a really decked out bicycle. It has a lot of custom features on it. It has a brizgovik, so that's the that rubber flap attached to the back. It was custom made by someone. Usually those bikes didn't come with brizgoviki. On the wheel, he has installed cataphoty, we call them, so that's the reflectors and other additional items he purchased. He is not afraid that his hand pump will be stolen, so that's there. So bike got all the goodies, and he has actually rear view mirror, which is also was hard to find. So yeah, he got a Mercedes of the Soviet bicycles right there. But if you look closer to his Adidas shoes, besides 3 stripes, which is, tells you from far away, hey, I'm wearing Adidas, his outsole look weird. It's tapered down, so it's something not normal about those shoes, but that's how this Adidas ski shoes had outsoles, because you didn't need comfort for your heel, because you're not supposed to walk in those shoes. So I swear he got those ski Adidas shoes. So while I can't say we had permanent shortage of shoes. I think Soviet-made shoes we had enough, but most people would prefer to purchase better quality, more stylish foreign shoes. And when I say foreign shoes, were mostly made in other socialist countries like Romania, Czechoslovakia, and also from Finland. So if you ever see a line of people standing next to the shoe store, like on this photo, it says "Obuv" above them, shoes, that means that something was for sale at that day that usually you can't buy, probably shoes from Czechoslovakia or Finland. And I made a video already about it, all these different interesting expressions in Soviet retail. And one of such expressions was что-то выбросили, something was thrown out, but not thrown out in the trash, thrown out in a store. So besides normal ugly Soviet shoes, there'll be something of high demand, something deficit, like maybe Finnish winter boots or stylish high heel shoes from Czechoslovakia. And that video is called Secrets of the Soviet Retail, Curious Terminology of the Customers, Newspeak in the USSR. And I'll post the link also below in the comment section. So one of the popular foreign brands in Soviet Union was Tsebo from Czechoslovakia. So like on this, you see the logo. It's in Russian, says Tsebo, and Czechoslovacké изделие, so it's an item from Czechoslovakia. So they made quality leather shoes, and those were quite stylish. So women like those a lot as well. They made nice quality men's loafers. Romanian brand Tomis was also popular in the Soviet Union, like you see on this picture. Sports shoes from Romania brand was called Romica. So that's the closest you could get in the Soviet Union to so-called sneakers. We call them krasovki. So that was the name for this type of shoes that Americans call sneakers. So Romica was if you have a pair of Romicas, you are really cool. Not as cool as Adidas, but you are cool. Many Soviet women would kill or would do some other nasty things for a pair of nice boots from Yugoslavia. Usually the brand was Kastana, and those were so stylish, so cool, quite expensive, about 150 ruble a pair. So you're talking about spending your monthly salary on a pair of nice shoes. But those shoes from Yugoslavia were the coolest boots that any Soviet woman could dream of. Another popular foreign brand in the Soviet Union was Botas from Czechoslovakia. And it was so popular that in some places like Georgia, which is Georgia, one of the former socialist republic, any sports shoes still being called Botas. So any sneakers, they'll call them Botas. And you may guess already then, in situations like this, when supply is low, demand is high, anyone who has access to quality foreign shoes was extremely important person. That person had blood, as we used to call. So if you work in a shoe retail or warehousing, you are an important person. Everyone wants to be your friend. I used to date a lady in the early 90s back in Kiev, and when I saw her apartment for the very first time, I was very impressed. She had really nice furniture from Yugoslavia. She had a really nice refrigerator, even a separate freezer, which I never seen a freezer before in the Soviet Union, and other nice TV and everything else. And I was very impressed. And she said, well, I used to work at the central shoe warehouse of Kiev, and I was an important person. Okay, now I must mention, so all these long and boring videos so far was covering situation with shoes in the Soviet cities. Situation with the shoes out in the country, in the villages, was quite different and way, way more depressing. As a kid, I spent every summer out in the country in a small village in northern Ukraine, and I remember my grandmother being barefoot all summer long, except when it's cold or raining. Then she would wear rubber boots. Similarly, my grandpa Sergei pretty much all the time wore rubber boots. Some people wore kirzovые сапоги. So kirza, it's like a leather substitute, could be translated. So it looks like it's a leather boots, but it's kirza. So most villagers would wear boots, or women quite often be just barefoot all summer long. And only for the very special occasions like weddings or funerals, village people would wear loafers or sandals like you see at this photo. So here's a perfect illustration of the summertime in northern Ukraine. This photo was taken in 1972 in the village Kamka, not far away from my village. And as you see, out of 6 women, 4 are barefoot. And that was just a normal way women were dressed in the summer. And here's another fine example from the northern Ukraine. Once again, it's 70s. You're looking at pastuhi, people who are watching over a herd of cows. Lady wears rubber boots, and a guy wears kirzove sapagi, that leather replacement boots. In this photo, you see a lady who works at the milk farm, so she's the молочница. And that was probably taken in early spring, so she's wearing the warm kind of boots. Once again, it's a tall winter boots with rubber galoshi over that. Shoot, I almost forgot to tell you my drama story about shoes in the Soviet Union. So one time my father gave me his shoes, and I believe they were made in Czechoslovakia, and they were nice casual shoes made out of brown velvet fabric. No one else had it in our school, so I was like, a lot of people were complimenting, telling me they're nice looking shoes. That first time ever happened to me. And I was so happy. They were comfortable, looked good. But one time on Saturday, we had a cleaning outside. So there's a spring cleaning, so-called subotnik. And while I was helping, I managed to get my shoes in the dog's crap. So I was I'm not sure what I was doing, but I got it on the top of my shoe. You know, it's not a big deal if it's on the bottom because you can wash it off, but somehow I managed to get it on the top. And no matter what I was trying to do, wash it by hand, I was spraying like a perfume on the top. I could not get rid of the dog's crap smell. Like literally you would sit in class and you will smell dog shit. And I was almost crying, but I had to throw those shoes away. I couldn't get rid of that horrible smell. So I enjoyed those shoes for a very short period of time, and then I had to throw them away. That was a big drama. And only after the collapse of the Soviet Union did I manage to get myself a nice, long-lasting leather sneakers. The brand was Pony, and I described that story in my book, American Diaries 1995. They lasted for a long time, and actually they fell apart only in the United States. When I was picking apples in the fall, so rain and wetness, and they fell apart finally. So they lasted a long time. They cost me $50, but that was the shoes that the very first quality sneakers that I ever owned were white leather Pony. Well, my friends, it's all I have for you today on the topic of shoes. I hope you enjoyed this video, maybe learned something new. We'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.